In the temple of Athena in Athens, it was inscribed in an epigram, "All human things are a circle." In this book we will learn how history is seasonal and that winter is coming. Hi and welcome to the BookLab. I'm Björn and this is the place where we bring you the best book recommendations when it comes to philosophy, psychology, human nature and human potential. And today we're going to talk about the fourth turning, what the cycles of history tells us about America's next rendezvous with destiny by William Strauss and Neil Howe. In the fourth turning, William Strauss and Neil Howe presents a bold, cyclical theory of history that challenges the traditional linear view of progress. Published in 1997, this book examines patterns in Anglo-American history and argues that every 80 to 100 years, society undergoes a period of crisis followed by a renewal, which they term the fourth turning. According to the authors, the United States, and since the world is so connected right now, probably other countries as well, are heading towards a fourth turning, a period of upheaval, and understanding these historical circles can help us better prepare for the future. Strauss and Howe's key thesis is that history follows a predictable cycle of 4 generational turnings that repeat across the centuries. Each turning lasts about 20 to 25 years and each has different unique characteristics. We have the awakening, the unraveling, the upheaval, and the crisis, which is called the fourth turning. The theory suggests that major societal changes are not random, but they are driven by generational personalities shaped by each turning. The authors identify these 4 different phases as reoccurring patterns since the 15th century. The fourth turning or crisis is always a period of profound change, war, revolutions or major structural collapses, and is usually followed by a rebirth or a high. The generational archetypes talked about in this book, the nomad, the artist, the prophet, the hero, all these characters are vividly drawn, and their description of how each generation interact with each other is fascinating, but sometimes it's quite hard to follow, especially if you listen to it as an audiobook, which I did. The book's predictive nature makes it feel like a roadmap, and it's one of the reasons why this book still has a big following. Strauss and Howe argues that understanding these cycles equip us with the tools that we need to deal with the uncertainties of the present and the future. And that's how they tap into our deep human desire to find pattern within history. It feels so nice and orderly, right, to have such a predictable pattern that keep things in order, right? And I think that's one of the reason and one of the criticisms of this book, and also a criticism of mine. The cyclical framework can feel overly deterministic, and the author's reliance on these patterns to predict the future seems speculative at times. Critics argue that the book's theory fails to account for the complexities and nuances of historical events that falls outside of this pattern. It also raises questions whether societal change can be so formulaic when influenced by unpredictable factors such as technology, globalization, and individual agency. I would not be surprised if people in any time or in any era could find signs in society or the world around them to point towards, to claim that they are in a fourth turning or in an upheaval or in a high. But that said, the descriptions these guys have for the fourth turning brings a lot of thoughts to things we see throughout the world today, and it kind of brings a chill down my spine. I'm just going to give you some examples here from the book. Here's an example of how the fourth turning could start. Quote, "A global terrorist group blows up an aircraft and announces that it possesses portable nuclear weapons. Opponents charge that the president conducted the emergency himself for political purposes." And the second one, "A nationwide strike is declared. Foreign capital flee the US. A growing anarchy throughout the Soviet Union republics prompts Russia to conduct training exercises around its border. Lithuania erupts in civil war." Another one. The Center of Disease Control and Prevention announces the spread of a new communicable virus. The disease reaches densely populated areas, killing some, and mandatory quarantine actions are required. We all recognize that one. Iran declares its alliance with Russia, gold and oil prices soar. The authors admit that it's unlikely that the scenarios will play out exactly like this, but they all follow the same underlying basic dynamic of a crisis. A spark will trigger a chain reaction of further emergencies. Neglected areas of the civic fabric will be exposed. Angers at mistakes that we made will translate into calls to action. Quote, "It's unlikely that the catalyst will worsen into a full-fledged catastrophe, since nations will probably find a way to avert the initial danger and stabilize the situation for a while. But," quote, "yet even if the dire consequences are temporarily averted, America will have entered a fourth turning. Civic confidence will have declined, people will become more distrustful to institutions, and then eventually distrust even more things, their own job security, their ability to pay for themselves at older age, their pensions. There will be an implosion in societal trust. Alarms will go off for individuals, realizing how weakly their nation has prepared for their future. What previously was subliminal fears now become urgent." So that kind of gives you a little bit of a taste of the tone of this book. And if you enjoy the content on this channel and you like non-fiction books, then subscribe. You will get similar content in your feed, and whenever I publish a video, it will pop up there right in front of your eyes when you go onto YouTube. So I appreciate that, and it also helps me reach more people. Now let's get into the verdict of this book. Despite its limitations, The Fourth Turning is a provocative and stimulating read for anyone interested in history, sociology, and the future of society. It's particularly interesting for people who like to think about grand historical narratives and the cyclical nature of everything that we experience. It actually reminds me of another book. These books are not alike at all, but the theme reminded me of Same as Ever, A Guide to What Never Changes by Morgan Housel, which I read a while back. Stories about what people have always done and always will do, timeless lessons about risk, opportunity, and living a good life. When people face an uncertain future, they try to forecast with more intelligence, data, precision. Far more effective is to do the opposite, to look backward and broad. This book talks a lot about the most common patterns throughout history that keeps repeating, how human nature never changed. I really recommend this book, and I will link to the full review of this below. This is a more accessible book than this one, I have to say. So back to The Fourth Turning. While the predictive claims of this book should be approached with some caution, the book's broader insights about the role of generational dynamics that shape history is food for thought, and anything for the more philosophical minded reader and people who like to understand the cyclical nature of things, or what Nietzsche called eternal reoccurrence. Some readers might find this book very American-centric. As a Swede, I had some trouble following some of the ideas in this book, because I, of course, am not as well versed in American history, and it takes for granted that you have at least some background in the most the basics of American history, which I don't fully have, I think, which made this kind of hard to follow sometime. And also it kind of leaves out the rest of the world. It's very much focused on American history. That's just a good thing to know if you decide to pick this book up. The Fourth Turning will make you think deeply about generational attitudes and cultural shifts and how they might impact the future. Let me know in the comments if you think we have entered a fourth turning, and if you have read the book, what's your thoughts on it. I would love to hear more about that. This book was not hitting as hard as I hoped it would. I heard a lot of good things about this book recently, or not a lot of good things about it, but this book has kind of popped up here and there, probably due to some of the global situations that we have with potential big conflicts in the world and so on. A lot of people are arguing that we are in a fourth turning now and that we're in a very decisive era. I don't know if we are. So this has popped up a lot of times. I thought, yeah, now I need to pick this book up. This was sent to me by some publisher a long time ago, so it's been lying around on my bookshelf for a while. Finally picked it up. It didn't really hit a home run, unfortunately. I expected more, but I do not regret reading it. It was worth my time, and hopefully yours too. And I think especially if you're American, this will be a book that you want to check out. That's the video for the week. I'm back next week with more book reviews. I'm wrapping up a book called How the Other Half Lives, which talks about tenement communities in New York in the 1890s, or is it maybe later? I'll have more details in that book review. It talks about how the poor and the deprived and the addicts live in these horrible living situations in the slums of New York, basically. So that's an interesting book. I'm going to talk a lot about it in the next video. I'll put up some shorts during this week, so check those out too. And that's everything from me. Thanks for this week. Happy reading. Björn out.